Back then, there was a model of starting companies, starting startups. In 2025, we've got this amazing Gen AI tool. How do you think entrepreneurs and enterprise are evolving or are innovating since you wrote it about 10 years ago?
Yeah, it's funny. I think I wrote a blog about this recently as well, like just 10 years reflecting on, what's changed, what's different, what still hasn't moved. And I think, the most important part is that I would say the cost of experimentation has dropped like radically. You were talking about raising, like even if you were an engineer that could write the code and design it and build it, like you're still talking like, hundreds of thousands of dollars to sort of get to a scalable piece of software that could probably serve 1,000 people without sort of, falling over. It has given way more people the opportunity to become entrepreneurs and experiment, which again is just a great thing for society in general.
The venture studio model is gaining traction. Barry, you took it to a whole new level with Nobody Studios, about launching around 100 companies in 5 years. What is venture studio? Define. Second, I want to ask you, Barry, is what inspired the idea and what makes the model of Nobody Studios so different?
Yeah, well, venture studios are just, we could even call them an asset class. They're rapidly growing. I think they've grown over 600% in the last 5 years alone. Now, the name venture studio, startup studio, is sort of existed for a while. But again, the definition of the venture studios is quite broad, right? You can have two people sitting in a shed and they describe themselves as a venture studio. And then you have businesses like our business, which, we don't do anything else. We don't sell services. We're not an agency that happens to build products. We just build products. That's it. We either build them or we die. And we only make money by selling the companies we build, right? We have no other forms of revenue. Like, we've always had a very audacious goal, bold vision that many people have got excited about and sort of got behind. One of the things I think the studio is very good at is telling our story. Our CEO, Mark, is a great storyteller and has always been able to communicate that to a broad audience about what we're trying to do differently. And there are many people in the world that sort of feel that the venture ecosystem needs to change. And that's many different ways. More people having access to that system, right? So it not just being multimillionaires and VCs that get to invest in early stage startups, but regular people who have regular jobs and regular lives and are not millionaires. Like, they deserve an opportunity to be part of the future of tech and creating space for that.
Welcome to the Priceless Conversations, the podcast where we navigate the art and science of product management, automation, AI, and pricing. We do this with a mix of wit, wisdom, and some dashboard war related stories. Uh, I am Satya, a scientist who found her way in the AI and product management world. And yes, I still use research, lot of data, connect lot of dots to solve problems.
Thanks, Satya. This is Amit and your co-host for the Priceless Conversations. Uh, I'm a CPO. I've been a builder of dashboards, sometimes destroyer of unnecessary features, and your guide to this weird, wonderful, and widely frustrating world of product management. Thanks for joining us today.
Our guest is none other than Barry O'Reilly.
Yay!
He is the co-founder and chief innovation officer at Nobody Studios and a prolific author of Unlearn and Lean Enterprise books. Hi, Barry.
Hey, thanks very much for having me. I'm delighted to be on the show.
Hi, Barry.
How you doing?
So, Barry, you have had an incredible journey that spans across entrepreneurship, innovation, and thought leadership. For those who are unfamiliar with your work, how would you describe yourself and what drives you?
Yeah, well, I would sort of describe myself as an entrepreneur, a business advisor, and author. And really, my focus has always been at the intersection of business model innovation, product development, ways of working, and really culture transformation in businesses. I've been very lucky to work in pretty much nearly every continent now, apart from Antarctica, with various different companies around the world, and all different sizes as well. I've been an early member or founder in small startups that have grown and scaled, right through to working in sort of medium to large scale businesses or consulting to Fortune 500 companies over the years. So yeah, it's been a fantastic experience. Certainly not what I expected when I started out in many ways. It's certainly been a exploratory journey, if you will, too, as well. And I've learned a lot about myself, about what I like and don't like, simply by, taking action and maybe saying yes to things that were challenging or uncomfortable, but I learned how to do them along the way. And that's really probably something that's really helped me as an individual continue to grow and also find opportunities that I enjoy and will continue to sort of do in the future as well.
Barry, you've had a fantastic work and you've been to all the continents, and I can assure you, your book Unlearn is probably in one of the libraries in Antarctica too. So through your books, you've traveled and we've grown on Unlearn. What's one widely accepted business practice you believe companies need to unlearn right now?
Yeah, I think we're always in interesting times in business. Technology innovations continue to change how people work, what they're capable of doing, the tools they can use to make them more effective. If anything, I think one of the things many people have to unlearn, I believe, is starting to use tools to make them even more effective in their job. I've been spending a lot of time, obviously working with Satya as well on some of these initiatives around using tools in the artificial intelligence space, data and machine learning specifically, to radically even change the way I work. Many years ago, I wrote a blog recently about me sort of being up at, 9:45 p.m. at night, staring at a blank screen, my task list ever growing, me spending less time with the people I wanted to, my family in particular, because I had more things to do than I was capable of completing with the time that I had. And it was one of these moments where I realized that I couldn't keep working the way I was. I needed to unlearn myself about how to think about work. And that was probably over 4 years ago when I then started to say, well, I need to build a system of work that leverages tools or automation or data to allow me to be more efficient with my time, more productive, prioritize the right things, but also figure out, what tasks could I sort of get off my plate that weren't sort of, the best leverage point of my time. And one of the first tools that I started to experiment with many years ago was meeting co-pilots, and that for me was like a huge game changer, especially when I was doing, say, consulting work or advising work or sitting in meetings. This ability to have a co-pilot sitting in a session with me. So at the end of that session, one, I could go back and reflect on the conversation that was had and draw out actions and write agendas and wrap ups and follow ups in minutes and send them to people. But it's also been a catalog that I can go back to days later, weeks later, and also really understand. But probably the most powerful thing is in the moments of meetings, I never had to worry about like stopping and note taking and listening and paying attention and being engaged. And I could just go like 95% to just being highly engaged with the people that I was in those sessions with. And especially when you're working in a remote world, which again has become more and more a part of our lives, especially in the last 5 years. I just started to see a whole different experience of working in meetings, making the most of that time, having clarity of what was discussed, what the next steps were, what needed to be done, and then cataloging all of that information. And today, that's become a huge database, if you will, for me of pretty much every meeting I've been in for the last 5, if not 6 years. I have a capture of it that I can go back to, ask questions of, and especially now as the tools get more sophisticated, the insights I'm able to glean are being quite fascinating. So I think that's one of the things I would say to people, companies really need to unlearn, is they really need to start, not companies, but individuals, really challenging themselves and say, I need to change the way I work. And if you will, augment myself with these new technologies that help me be faster, more precise, which again is a fascinating space to be right now.
That because of overload of work and unlearning, if you had to write the lean methodologies again, how would you explore that in today's world, in today's scenario, and how would you approach business transformations at scale?
Yeah, so the thing that's really struck me probably most in the last sort of 6 months, maybe 9 months, I think the execution side of experimentation is vastly shrunk compared to what it was even 12 months ago. So what I mean by that is typically in a lean cycle, you're formulating a hypothesis, you're coming up with essentially a definition, a measure of success, and then you've got to create something, an experiment to exercise that hypothesis and see if you're right or wrong. And in the software context, that would mean, somebody might have a great business idea. They try and define the idea, they try and pick a target market, and they sort of set what success would be if they to prove that there's demand. And then they have to go off and build the experiment. And in some instances, that experiment is a feature or a product, but it could be weeks or months before they can actually construct something that is a meaningful experiment to execute against and test, if you will, the hypotheses. What I'm seeing now is that ability to build, execute, and test, measure, gather real data, very precise, and report back is just sort of massively reduced both in time, cost, and effort. So really, I think the real skill now is very much focused on this ability to identify and capture demand, like actually understand, do I have a problem worth solving that has sufficient demand, and then continue to execute and scale up. So that's probably one of the things that has probably shocked me the most. And even in our venture studio, Nobody Studios, it's an AI native venture studio. And Jeremy, who's one of our lead technologists, like I sat down with him last week and we were having a meeting about 2 new business ideas that we were thinking about, not how to build them, but how would we test if demand actually existed for the idea that we believed in. And we probably spent I think we had 45 minutes together. We probably spent 35 minutes talking about how would we model and measure the demand if it existed. Now, in that meeting, he got a notification for 3 bugs that somebody found on an existing product that we were building called Ovations. So while we were talking, he was like, excuse me, I've just got to go and fix these 3 bugs. So he stops to me, turns around, identifies what the bugs are, points the agent that he's using to rebuild that site, to tackle the bugs, fix them, redeploy the site, and then close the tickets and then move on. He did that literally in 3 minutes. No coding, just giving direction to agents to go and complete that task and relaunch the website with those bugs addressed, and the sales team out there sort of reselling, if you will, that product. And then we flip back to sort of solving what we were focused on, which was identifying how we would test demand for 2 new business ideas that we have, which he would then go and set another set of agents off to start building the first MVP of. And that is just amazing to me, where you're leveraging people's capabilities at a level probably that I've certainly never seen before. And, I'm in a position where I get to sort of see like a front row seat of what these tools are capable of. Now, are they building, GPRS, highly scalable, robust, compliant, multi-threaded, high availability applications? No. But in the earliest stages of product development, where you're really about testing demand and you need something that is stable and robust enough that, a couple of thousand people, if you're lucky, might start to use it, that's an absolute game changer, and fascinating in terms of the size and scale of teams that you need, really descaling. And again, that ties into one of the real core principles of lean for me, is like limiting your resources, time and effort until you have captured the demand you're aiming for before scaling. And I think, again, that's another fascination for me.
Absolutely, Barry. This also reminds me that for every career stories that we have heard so far, adapting, unlearning, and establishing yourself as a thought leader becomes a significant portion. So, your book on leaning, on Lean Enterprise positioned you as a thought leader, and it also changed your career trajectory in a way. This is how I would see it from audience perspective. How did that book really change your career project trajectory, like from your point of view and how you lived through it?
Yeah, it was sort of a fascinating experience even to live through it, to be honest. So I was working in a company called ThoughtWorks, which is one of the pioneers, and I know Sachi, you've worked there as well, of sort of agile software development. And this is sort of in about it's about 2010. And at that time, even the company I was in was very engineering focused. Right, I still remember on my first day, I walk in to this office in London, and it was a really unique company. They had no managers. It was just a room with like 4 desks, like big desks on it. And whoever was there was just sitting around. And I didn't know who the CEO was, or if somebody was like just having their lunch. Like I couldn't tell anything. I sat down on this table, and people were sort of asking me, what do you do? And I'm like, well, at the time, I think I was hired as a project manager. And I was like, yeah, I like building products, and this is the kind of things that I tend to focus on. And most people were like, all right, so you're not an engineer, then you don't write code. What do you do then? How do you help the team in any way? And it was kind of mental. But I was like just one of these people who was like not an engineer. And it was quite funny. I started then working on projects where we would have assignments, and I was showing people this idea of prototyping. So I would sit down with the engineers and I'd be like, right, what's the idea, and how can we map out who the customer is, and what are some experiments that we could run to test it? And it was quite different from how many people were working in that company. Before, most people were sort of very much in this sort of deconstruction mode. They were given an assignment, it was an engineering problem, just go execute the code. Where I was getting people to like leave the office and go out for coffee and sit down with customers and talk to them. I remember we were working with one business called lastminute.com. It's a famous sort of online travel booking site in the UK. And we were working on Leather Lane, and I would just sort of bring the engineers out of their desk and say, let's go sit down and show people the prototype you just made at lunchtime, or let's get feedback from things. And the engineers were like, what the hell is this guy making us do? But it created a very different way of working for people. And even with the project we did for lastminute.com, we doubled their revenue when we launched the product literally overnight. And so it got a lot of attention internally, where people were like, this is a different way of working. And then so I was working in London at the time, and then I got an email from Jez Humble, who had just written the Continuous Delivery book, which was sort of a seminal, again, software development book about building and releasing software like thousands of times a day, and he rings me up and asks me if I go out for lunch. And then he came over to London. We went out for lunch, and he was like, hey, I'm writing this new book. Eric Ries had just published The Lean Startup in 2010, and I had met Eric and was following his work. And Jez was like, well, I'm going to write Lean Enterprise. So if you're not a startup, what does that look like? And engineering is a part of that, but this product management and development piece is a huge part of it. And I've been following what you've been doing internally in the company, and I want you to be part of this project, like write a couple of chapters for me, which again for me was great. Like it's one of these things you always dreamed of. Everyone maybe has a dream of writing a book. It's one of these things, and I certainly did. But that opportunity presented itself because I was starting to share what I was doing. And even that was very awkward for me. Like I'm dyslexic. I have a solid history of D minuses in English literature. The thought of even blogging was kind of embarrassing for me. But it was actually that process of reflecting. And this is what I've really learned about writing, and maybe lessons I would encourage other people listening. I was just sharing what I was doing and what I was learning. There was no sort of aspiration to sort of get 1 million followers. It was just my way of doing reflection and synthesis. And then publishing it just sort of, again, felt extremely uncomfortable and odd. But it became a lightning rod. So people around the world started to see what I was writing and sharing. People internally in ThoughtWorks saw what I was writing. And it ultimately got me the chance to write this Lean Enterprise with Jez and Joanne Molesky, who also worked at ThoughtWorks at the time. And that book just, again, it sort of exploded, right? And we've sold hundreds of thousands of copies. It's translated into, I think 10 or 11 languages now at this point. So I guess what I would always say to people is you never know, until you put yourself out there and put your ideas out there, not expecting anything, just putting them out there. And it does become a lightning rod for people who are interested in the same things. And I've actually met so many amazing people by putting the ideas out there, and I would just think that's a really powerful way to both learn, to reflect, and then to find more people who are going to challenge your thinking, but also are working on similar things. And that's really what I've learned through the whole process, and it's been amazing.
So you've written Lean Enterprise about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Back then, there was a model of starting companies, starting startups. In 2025, we've got this amazing Gen AI tool. How do you think entrepreneurs and enterprise are evolving or are innovating since you wrote it about 10 years ago?
Yeah, it's funny. I think I wrote a blog about this recently as well, like just 10 years reflecting on, what's changed, what's different, what still hasn't moved. And I think, the most important part is that I would say the cost of experimentation has dropped like radically in ways that really I probably couldn't have anticipated, even when I think about 10 years ago. I think it is. Like, I think the people who can build, that profile has changed. Right before, like 10 years ago, if you wanted to try and build a startup, you were talking about raising, like, even if you were an engineer that could write the code and design it and build it, like, you're still talking like, hundreds of thousands of dollars to sort of get to a scalable piece of software that could probably serve 1,000 people without sort of, falling over. And you had to build it, a website, maybe a mobile app, and maybe a mobile web, like all these platforms you had to sort of stress about, and keeping them consistent and working. And I just think that experience is just radically different now. And so the people I think who can build and then the cost of building are probably the two I think that is very fascinating for me. That really, I think it's, it has given way more people the opportunity to become entrepreneurs and experiment, which again is just a great thing for society in general.
Yeah, we need more of them.
The things I think we still struggle with is, people have this opportunity now where they have to recognize that the world is changing at a really sort of exponential rate. And you can't sort of just have business and technology in isolation, really. Companies are still very much designed, I think, in that manner, especially larger enterprises, where if they're not ingraining technology into everything that they do, and this is again why, even at the start of the show, I would say at an individual level, you know, we've all got to start thinking, how can we use technology to make our job, cheaper, faster, and better? Like, we just have to do that. And then when you start thinking about how teams work together, that has to, again, be cheaper, faster, better, and right through to companies. And, there's just the products even, I think, that exist in the world today are not really designed for that. They're designed to be very siloed, to be very fragmented. They've data models that don't allow them to do and leverage data and machine learning in an efficient manner. And I just think we're just about to see this new explosion now of tools where people have designed, if you will, from a place where data is sort of, if you will, federated all over the place. And they've created, models that they can sort of interrogate and learn and connect dots that people probably couldn't see before. The classic example probably for most product managers and leaders of your show is, they might think of, I remember when Jira was like an instance, like you had to deploy your own Jira instance.
The on-prem Jira.
The on-prem machines, right? And then they moved to the cloud. But even that, again, the structure of how information is managed, you can't really interrogate it and leverage it because, I like using Kanban and Satya likes using, I don't know, Scrum, and someone else likes using, and so how can we talk to each other to understand, like, what's our cycle times and where's the work getting blocked? And, it's actually this one person 4 levels down in the company who's waiting on access to a data store. And if we gave it to them, it would unlock 20 other people further down the chain. Like, we can't do that, but there's products being built now. .work is one of them, which I'm an investor in, an advisor to, where they're joining these disparate dots about how we manage work, inside work, and making that information as platforms. Yeah, so these things to me are like fascinating, right? But it means we have to change the way we think about work and understand what insights we can glean to inform how we work. And most people use very little data. They use their intuition, the data that they're gathering from experience and know-how, which is valuable, but they're not pairing it with objective insights. And I think, again, this is fascinating. Another great example, we do at the moment in the studio. So Jeremy, our head of technology, like every single thing he does, he has an agent that just sort of captures the work he's done and populates tickets in ClickUp to track his time, how long he spent on it. So all the stuff that I never did, like I know the work I'm doing, but I never update the ticket system, right? And all that data is lost and visibility is lost. That's solvable now by having an agent that just basically can be asking you, what did you do for the last 15 minutes? What did you tell the agent to go off and fix those 4 bugs? And you got someone doing design thinking work over here and someone prioritize. Like, again, this is all automatically being updated without the person having to sit there and spend 30, 40, 50, 2 hours typing into Jira tickets. Like, it's gone, And so for me, that's where some of the real magic that I think the world has yet to experience. And of leveraging these tools to sort of create a higher fidelity of auditability, traceability, observability, really, I think is what it is. And then using that insight to generate better ways of working is just fascinating to me, And again, we're only at the beginnings of it because I've only seen a few people start to do it even in the last few months as they start to understand these tools and they become more available. And that's, again, extremely exciting.
True.
I think golden days are still coming. with all the automations on the way, even the venture studio model is gaining traction. Barry, you took it to a whole new level with Nobody Studios, about launching around 100 companies in 5 years. And I'm very proud of working with Nobody Studios, and I've been asked this question very often. What is venture studio? Define. Second, I want to ask you, Barry, is what inspired the idea and what makes the model of Nobody Studios so different?
Yeah, well, venture studios are just, and we could even call them an asset class. They're rapidly growing. I think they've grown over 600% in the last 5 years alone. Now, the name venture studio, startup studio, has sort of existed for a while. But again, the definition of the venture studios is quite broad, right? You can have two people sitting in a shed and they describe themselves as a venture studio. And then you have businesses like our business, which, we don't do anything else. We don't sell services. We're not an agency that happens to build products. We just build products. That's it. We either build them or we die. And we only make money by selling the companies we build, right? We have no other forms of revenue. So just to help people who mightn't be familiar with the term, a venture studio is sort of a combination, if you will, of a number of maybe known sort of entities in the venture building space. So people often think a venture studio is like an incubator, and it is, where we have ideas and we're working on them. But incubators often, that's all they can do, right? They don't supply funding, they don't supply people to co-found and work with you. It's just a space for ideation. Accelerators are often another one we get confused with. Accelerators tend to be multi-week programs, anywhere from sort of a month to 3 months. Y Combinator is probably one of the most famous ones, where teams that have a product apply to become part of this sort of program, if you will, and they get into the program, they get some funding and access to network and advisors. But that's it, right? There's no promise of capital or funding or anything about it. And then you have venture capital, which is really the financing side of venture, where, again, these venture capitalists don't come up with ideas, they don't build ideas, they simply fund the idea if they believe in it. And really, so a venture studio is really taking all of these components and then sort of putting them into a single entity. So at Nobody Studios, we raise our own money, we have our own business ideas that we believe in, and we sort of self-fund from the money we raise. And then we have a group of entrepreneurs who've built many businesses sort of co-found those companies and then source potential other co-founders or early operators to work on those companies and grow them. And we ideally aim to incubate companies sort of over a sort of 3 to 12 month period, and then get them ready, that they're ready for external investment and capital, and then self-funded. And then the way we make money is sell those companies. So we're really focused about early company creation, sort of ideating, building and launching these companies. And then we're optimized for early to mid-stage exits. So we're not trying to build unicorns. I think 80% of acquisitions happen under $300 million. So we're focused on building companies that we could sell for 10 million, 20 million, 100 million. Brilliant. If we can do that, we'll be delighted. And the probably point of differentiation is we are an AI first studio. So we just don't build AI companies, but AI is built into all the companies that we're aiming for. And we're trying to do 100 in 5 years. So the velocity and the volume is probably a big differentiator. We're, in a funding perspective, we're the first venture studio to ever do equity crowdfunding. So 2 years ago, we basically launched a campaign on a crowdfunding platform where anyone, it didn't matter if you were a sort of high net worth individual or an angel investor, you could be a retail investor. So, you could work in a coffee shop, be a doctor, be a bus driver. You could invest and own a piece of Nobody Studios. And we raised over $800,000 from investors, 1,000 investors in 55 countries. And then we've also got amazing investors from Fortune 500s and other startups in the studio. We're currently doing our Series A raise. at the moment. So we have a lead investor in place for that. So it's a very exciting and stressful,
Mhm.
sometimes
Yeah.
fun experience. And so again, if people here on your show listening are interested, I'd love to share more.
Wow, that's such a wonderful model and more of a democratic model, where you have investors from all over the world. That would be doing a lot of experimentation. And I was wondering, how do you keep up with this balance of rapid experimentation and maintaining a long-term vision? Because some of you have a very long-term approach to things. You don't make money by services, as you said.
Yeah, that's
You
it.
only make money when a company is incubated, product grows, and then the company is sold. So you have an amazing long-term vision of things. How do you do that, in your venture career and in your own career, balance these things? Rapid.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd love. There's no easy answer to this, right? It's just we have been extremely lucky, right? Like first of all, like we've always had a very audacious goal, a bold vision that many people have got excited about and sort of got behind. One of the things I think the studio is very good at is telling our story. Our CEO Mark is a great storyteller and has always been able to communicate that to a broad audience about what we're trying to do differently. And there are many people in the world that sort of feel that the venture ecosystem needs to change, and that's many different ways. And from more people having access to that system, right? So it not just being multimillionaires and VCs that get to invest in early stage startups, but regular people who have regular jobs and regular lives and are not millionaires. Like they deserve an opportunity to be part of the future of tech and creating space for that. Um,
Wow.
and then right through to the other point you've subtly mentioning is it takes time to build companies and to sell companies, right? So before even the viability of our studio is proved, we have to still prove it, is that you need a consistent creation and selling of companies to support the business. So as we sell a company, which we've yet to do, we're about 12 months, we believe, away from hopefully our first exit. What we do is we take a portion of the funds, well, whatever we have, say we own 70% of a company when we sell it. What we do is we put 30% of that back into the studio to build more companies. And then we give 70% of the proceeds back to our investors. So everyone who invested in us gets a dividend. But we have to keep doing that again and again and again, right? It's not like we do it once and we're all finished. It's like we do it once and then people are like, right, when's the next one going to happen, right? So this idea of pressure and tempo and quality of getting these things done is top of mind for us. But it does require people to buy into the long-term vision to stay with us, and that's challenging, right? Like most
Yes.
people, they don't like delayed gratification. They want instant gratification. They want the instant results, and company building is extremely difficult. It's not a solved problem, and there's many things that can go wrong, especially at the earliest stage of company creation. In many ways, your expected sort of failure rate is extremely high, but we've designed that in the way we build companies. When we have ideas, we don't just give people $250,000 and say come back in 6 months. Like we give them $5,000 and say come back in 3 weeks. And then if they come back with evidence of demand, then we give them $10,000 and say, right, come back in another 3 weeks. And then if they can keep showing progress, then we keep funding them. But if they find out that they've failed or that the demand isn't there, we haven't given them $250,000 and cost us that amount. It's cost us $15,000. So we're limiting our resources and forcing, if you will, demonstration of progress to keep funding the businesses. And that's been a fascinating model to sort of work through, iterate, and design. And again, I think it's one of the big points of difference for us is that we've been able to conserve even the limited funds that we've had to date to continue to exist, if that makes sense. And again, that's one of the hardest parts in startups is actually just staying alive. If you can do that, you've still got a chance if you're still in the game.
This is music to every investor's ear, Barry. The way investors like people who are tenacious, investors like people who know how to pivot, and they want to be part of stories that have more success. So, what's here next for Nobody Studios? And yes, I would love to know how can people invest and how can people be part of such a great journey?
Yeah, so we're at the point now with our Series A that we're really looking for institutional investors at this point. So it's these are often, we're at just a point where the investment level is venture capital firms, family offices, institutions, right? The minimum checks now are sort of they're over 100,000 as an example that we would go for when we're raising a $15 million round. That's what we're doing at the moment. We will in the future continue to crowdfund companies that we work on. So we'll always want to have that opportunity for retail investors to be in part of what we're doing. Capital is only one part of our equation. We talk about talent, influence, and capital. So no one component will make us successful. It's sort of all three. And capital is pretty obvious what it is. Yes, we need money to survive. Okay, that makes sense. But talent is, again, giving people the opportunity to work on some of these businesses with us. And again, Satya is working on one of our businesses called CatGPT at the moment, which is an AI-focused platform and newsletter. So people can come and work in the studio and gain ownership in not only the company that they're working in, but the studio itself as well. So that's, again, a fascinating incentive that most people don't offer. And then influence is this ability of just sharing what we're doing, telling people, like being on this podcast and having me on as a guest, you have a lot of influence in your networks and you're sharing or giving me a chance to share, what we're doing in the studio. So all of these things have a massive effect, right? So you can work with us, you can share our story with your network, or you can invest in us. And that's why we always say talent, influence, and capital are the things that help us be successful. And no one thing is going to make us successful on its own. So yeah, again, if people are interested, do go look at nobodystudios.com and our focus at the moment is to close our investment round, but as we close that round, then we'll be sort of leveling up even more companies that we'll be working on, and there'll be opportunities for people to come and be part of the studio.
Yeah, I think that would be great for investors and people who want to know the story of Nobody Studio.
Barry, you mentioned three things, that is shaping Nobody Studios. I think there's also the fourth element, which is artificial intelligence, which we have been speaking through this conversation. And if you have to draw a framework, then how do you see AI fitting into the venture studio model and the business strategy that's evolving with time?
Yeah, so we would say we're an AI first venture studio, and that doesn't mean that we build AI companies. It means that we leverage artificial intelligence, data and machine learning in every part of how we build both the studio and companies. So just to maybe really differentiate, I'll give you an example with the studio. So again, Satya's been part of this, like we have built like little bots to help us with fundraising, where we can get everybody in the studio to share their LinkedIn details with us. And then we have databases of investors, and we're able to do sort of high probability matching between people in the studio and their network about people who could potentially invest in the studio or companies we're working on, right? That's just automating the fundraising process, if you will. Similarly, when we're doing company documents or setting up data rooms, which are sort of like, if you will, document stores for every company we create, we've sort of automated that process, right? So when we come up with an idea, we want to instantiate a company, we can do all the legal documentation, create a governance mechanism and a data room, which is what you share with investors that they look through before they invest in an automated manner. And everything from social media marketing, go to market, all of these teams are automating the capabilities, if you will, that they're going to offer. So we sort of have this AI theme running through the studio in everything we're trying to do. And then it's the companies themselves, right? We're always challenging, just like Jeremy is working on Ovations, where it's literally like one engineer is like building and launching a whole platform on his own, in conjunction with a marketer and a product person. That's it. Don't need any more people in the team, and so it's fascinating again. Like it's not like I love this quote. I saw Jensen, the CEO of NVIDIA, said, AI is not going to take your job, but somebody who knows how to use AI is going to get your job. And that is sort of how I think about it, right? It's the people who are learning to leverage these technologies are going to be the people who are desirable to be in workforces. The AI isn't just going to come and steal your job. It needs human. It's human plus machine. So, if you're just a human and you don't know how to use these tools, you'll struggle. If you're just an AI and you're not a human, you'll struggle. So it's the people who can go human plus these tools, AI, they become highly desirable in the marketplace, and we have learned that as well. Because it's making us very efficient as a business. And so again, that's what I would be encouraging people to think about in their daily work. Like I sit there with my friends, my family, my parents, my wife. I'm like, you just need to start using these tools. Just try them. Think of a simple thing that you're doing, and then try and do it with this tool and see the results you can get about getting a little bit faster, a little bit more organized, a little bit more, and again, that's the experimentation, and it's exciting.
Very inspiring, Barry. I think Amit and people who are listening are even more inspired by the model, and I think we'll have more discussions in the future. So, something that is also a major factor is because AI is changing our everyday world by each minute of each hour. If you could predict what's going to be the major shift in new businesses over the next decade, not today, not tomorrow, but through the next decade, what would that shift be?
Yeah, well, it's kind of, we're in this kind of fun space at the moment, right? Where, there's like the dystopia version, where Terminator basically Skynet kicks in the next 3 years and we're all not around anymore. And that's sort of the end of humanity, but I am an optimist. So I'll probably speak to more of the, the optimistic sort of path. But it like if you extrapolate from where we are right now, like I am personally finding that a lot of the routine, what I would find less interesting but required disciplined work, like filling out Jira tickets, is actually going away. Like I have to spend less of my time doing this sort of, I don't know what if you want to call it, hygiene work, or like just be a good citizen work, that is should be done but never gets done. But it is getting done now because I have tools to help me do it. So really, where I am spending more and more of my time is in this very creative, sort of interesting, experimenting, strategic, all these words, right? Where I'm generally thinking more creatively about how I and where I spend my time, right? So my needle of like exciting versus operational work is like shifting more and more to like this sort of creative space, right? And that is fascinating and fun. I feel like I'm, more doing the work that excites me than the work that I feel like needs to be done but is routine and boring to a certain extent. So that's good. And I think that in the next sort of 2 to 3 years, what that could look like for me personally is, it's kind of frightening in a way, but when I think about how productive I could be at what I point my energy at. And then if you sort of extrapolate maybe, another 3 to 5 years on top of that, we could be in places where large portions of the population are doing not only, but the vast majority, highly creative, inquisitive work, and maybe a lot of the routine work is starting to be automated. For me, again, that's a really interesting society situation you get into, where the more people we have doing creative work,
Yeah.
I think the happier they are. I think the more engaged they are. And again, the promise of automation is that the cost of production goes down, the time of production goes down, and the quality of certainly routine production goes up. So, maybe we're in a very different world, in the years to come, where maybe we don't even need money anymore. Maybe these
Yeah.
sorts of things like start to be a different world, and like that again is a very fascinating sort of space that you probably need to do a podcast on that in itself, you know. But,
Yeah.
but again, that's how as you extrapolate these things, that's where it gets kind of interesting.
So many insights, Barry. We've learned a lot. I think my favorite was when you said, and this could resonate with a lot of companies, that we are not an AI company, but we are an AI company in a way because we use AI. And I think AI first means using AI to build the tools, do your job, or build the bridges or whatever work they are into. So if and we've unpacked amazing pieces of nuggets of wisdom today. How could our listeners reach out to you if they want to learn more, and if they want to probably be part of Nobody Studios in any capacity?
Yeah. Yeah, so if they're interested in the studio, they're welcome to go to nobodystudios.com. And we have a newsletter. You can follow us on all channels, from LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, etc. We're Nobody Crowd on a lot of social platforms, but do look for Nobody Studios. And then me personally, my website's barryoreilly.com. I blog and podcast regularly, so people can go on there, sign up to the newsletter, and I'm very disciplined again, and that's my team that makes me be disciplined on creating content, and really just sharing continuously what I'm learning. There's and that again has been a great source, just like we're here today sharing ideas and talking and learning together. And that's just been an amazing experience for me. So you'll find me on most social platforms. I don't get to spend a lot of time on social platforms because I'm trying to build stuff, but I'm out there if you want to connect on everything from whatever LinkedIn and so forth. That's a place where you can find me.
Patty, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for your wisdom, your story, and so many points that our listeners can really take home and apply in their everyday work. And for the listeners, stay curious, stay connected, and always keep building what matters.
Yeah, and a huge thank you to everyone in your team and your show. Investing your time, especially to build community, support community, and through your work in all these areas of Mind the Product, but also this podcast. And
Yes.
it means a lot, and it has a big effect. So yeah, I'll maybe just say thank you for all the people in the community for the contributions you're all making, because this is what helps move everybody forward. So yeah, thank you for your work in that space, and keep it up.
Well, it's a pleasure to host you on the show, and yeah, we hope to stay in touch. Have a good day. Bye bye.
Thank you.